She noticed the shift almost imperceptibly at first, a quick glance away when she entered the room, a half-finished sentence that trailed off the moment she approached. Her stepson, Ethan, had always been a thoughtful kid, quiet but open enough to share bits of his life with her over time. But lately, something had changed. His once easy smile was replaced with a tight-lipped expression, his eyes flickering away when she tried to catch them with concern. The phone had become his constant companion. It was tucked into his pocket or held close in his hand like a lifeline. When she'd pass by, she'd catch the faint glow of the screen illuminating his face in the dark, the rapid tap of fingers sending messages she wasn't meant to see. He jumped when the phone buzzed unexpectedly, a small tension tightening his shoulders as if he feared being caught. Whenever she asked about school or friends, he'd answer vaguely, a rehearsed tone in his voice that didn't quite reach his eyes. At dinner, the silence was heavier than usual. The clatter of cutlery against plates filled the gaps, but the warmth that used to flow across the table had grown cold. She remembered the evenings when Ethan would chatter about his day, animated and bright, but now he sat rigid, barely touching his food, lost in thoughts she couldn't reach. When she tried to bridge the gap, offering a smile or a question, his replies were curt, and his gaze fixed somewhere beyond her. Even in the small moments, things felt off. The door to his room was shut more often, sometimes with a soft click. That suggested a deliberate distance. She'd knock gently, hearing only silence in response. There was the faint smell of something unfamiliar, a subtle fragrance that didn't belong in their home. And then the late-night noises, muffled voices, the hurried rustle of papers, the soft thump of footsteps that stopped abruptly when she approached the hallway. Her heart tightened with worry, the quiet, gnawing feeling that he was carrying a burden too heavy to share. She caught herself imagining all sorts of scenarios, trouble at school, new friends she didn't know about, or something even deeper he was afraid to say out loud. She wanted to reach him, to break through whatever wall he'd built, but each attempt seemed to push him further away. The tension in the house was palpable, a fragile thread stretched thin between them. She found herself lingering outside his door, listening for any sign, any clue. Sometimes she caught glimpses of sadness in his eyes, flashes of frustration or fear, but the walls were too high to climb. She remembered the nights when she would lie awake, wondering if she had missed something, a change in his mood, a quiet cry behind closed doors, a silent plea for help she hadn't heard. The uncertainty gnawed at her, a storm of emotions swirling inside. Love, protectiveness, confusion, and a helpless ache that tightened her chest. Yet, beneath all of it, she refused to give up. Somewhere beneath the surface, she believed that the boy she knew was still there, waiting to be found. And she knew that when the time came, she would be ready to listen, to understand, no matter what the secret was. That night, the quiet of the house was broken by a sudden knock on the front door, soft but urgent. She hadn't expected anyone, and her heart quickened as she hesitated before opening it just a crack. Ethan stood there, eyes wide and restless, clutching a small, worn-out backpack. His face was pale, and for a moment, the walls he'd built around himself seemed to crumble. Without a word, he stepped inside, dropping the bag at his feet and avoiding her gaze. She followed him cautiously to the living room, where the dim light cast long shadows. As he sat down, his hands trembled slightly, fingers nervously fiddling with the strap of his backpack. The silence stretched, heavy and awkward, until a soft sound escaped the room. The unmistakable vibration of a phone buzzing inside the bag. Ethan's head snapped up, and for the first time, she saw the raw vulnerability in his eyes. Curiosity and concern overpowered hesitation, and she gently reached down, pulling the phone from the bag. The screen was lit with messages, each one a glimpse into a world she hadn't known existed. Secret conversations filled with worry, late-night plans, and cryptic words that hinted at more than just casual exchanges. She felt a lump form in her throat as she read, realizing this was the weight he had been carrying alone. But it wasn't just the phone. As she opened the bag fully, a stack of folded letters spilled out onto the floor. The paper was worn, edges softened from being unfolded and refolded countless times. Each letter was filled with heartfelt words, apologies, hopes, and fears. Messages from someone important to him, someone who seemed to be a source of both comfort and confusion. The depth of emotion in those pages was undeniable, and it painted a picture of a struggle far beyond what she had imagined. Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his body tense but shaking. She saw the fight within him, the battle between keeping his pain hidden and the desperate need to be understood. When her eyes met his, a tear escaped, tracing a path down his cheek. He looked away quickly, ashamed and scared, but also relieved that the truth was no longer a secret. Her own heart ached, a mix of sorrow and empathy flooding through her. The silent barrier he'd held up for weeks crumbled in that moment, revealing a depth of emotion that words alone couldn't express. She didn't need explanations or justifications, only the quiet promise that he wasn't alone anymore. The night stretched on as they sat together, the weight of the secret finally shared between them. No accusations, no anger, just the raw, fragile connection of two people trying to navigate a difficult truth. The tension that had built up for so long began to ease, replaced by a tentative understanding. In the stillness, she reached out slowly, placing a hand over his trembling. Ethan looked at her, uncertainty mingling with hope in his gaze. The secret he had hidden was out in the open now, fragile and real, and for the first time in weeks, she saw a glimmer of the boy she loved. The boy she was determined to help, heal. She waited, heart pounding as Ethan finally looked up, the silence between them filled with unspoken emotions. His eyes searched hers, searching for judgment or rejection, but found only quiet understanding. The weight of the secret hung heavy in the room, yet in that stillness, something fragile began to take shape, a tentative bridge of trust. Without forcing words, she reached out, her hand gently resting on his. The warmth of her touch was a quiet reassurance, a lifeline for a boy who had been carrying so much alone. Ethan's fingers twitched, then slowly curled around hers, the small act breaking down years of distance in a heartbeat. It was a beginning, fragile, but real. He began to speak, his voice low and hesitant at first, as if testing the waters. He told her about the confusion that had built inside him, the pressure of keeping his feelings locked away like a secret vault, the fear of disappointing those around him, the shame that had wrapped itself tightly around his chest. She listened, not interrupting, letting him pour out the storm he'd been weathering in silence. She saw the raw pain beneath the surface, the way his shoulders slumped under the invisible weight, how his eyes glistened with tears that had long been held back. It wasn't just about what had been hidden, it was about feeling isolated, misunderstood, and afraid to reach out. The silence that had felt suffocating was replaced by words that breathed life into their fractured connection. Her own voice trembled as she spoke, not with anger or disappointment, but with love and reassurance. She told him that no matter what, she was there, not to judge but to support him, that the family they shared was a place of safety, a place where he could be himself without fear. She promised that the walls he had built wouldn't have to keep him trapped anymore. Ethan's eyes searched hers again, this time with something new, a flicker of hope, a cautious trust that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry this alone anymore. They talked long into the night, unraveling the threads of pain and fear, replacing them with understanding and compassion. The tension that had once filled the house began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet warmth that neither had expected. It wasn't a sudden fix, Nor was it simple. Healing rarely is. But it was a step forward. Together, they faced the difficult truth, choosing connection over distance, empathy over silence. She saw the boy she had known all along beneath, the layers of secrecy and hurt, vulnerable, scared, but resilient. And in that moment, she knew that while the road ahead might be challenging, they would navigate it side by side. The night had brought more than just a revelation. It had brought a chance for a new beginning, fragile and imperfect, but real.